Hello and welcome to the African Utility Week studio. I'm Ashley Turan, Content Editor of ESI Africa. Joining us this morning we have Diego Rodriguez, Senior Economist of the Global Water Practice at the World Bank Group. Thank you for joining us, Diego.
Thanks, Ashley, for having me here.
How's your week been so far?
It's been great. I've been quite involved in the water sessions, but also we had the chance to present a lot of our water work in a couple of energy sessions. And I think that's a great advancement that you are seeing in the region, where a lot of both sectors, being energy and water, are quite interested in learning from each other.
Have you been getting a good response from these sessions?
Yeah, it's very full sessions, lots of questions, lots of interest also to see how we can learn from each other, from understanding how, for example, energy uses water and water uses energy, but how we can move and advance a bit the planning frameworks, investment decisions, joint investment decisions. So it's nice to see, you know, a lot of more appetite for understanding each other's sectors and collaboration in the future, hopefully.
So Diego, I wanted to ask you about the World Bank's Thirsty Energy Initiative. Can you explain a bit what this is and how it's being implemented in Africa?
Sure. So Thirsty Energy is an initiative that we started like 3 or 4 years ago, precisely to help the countries to understand the trade-offs that exist between water and energy. So energy uses a lot of water. Actually, 90% of the global energy requires some form of water. So it's water that is not only needed, for example, for hydropower production, but also fossil fuels, renewables, they need and they use a lot of water for cooling purposes. And also you have extractives such as oil and hydraulic, shale gas, etc., that also use water for the extraction processes, transportation, the processing, also require vast amount of water. At the same time, in the water sector, we also needed to understand the complexities of the energy sector, not only in hydropower, in order to be able to understand what are the trade-offs across the two sectors, how to incorporate that in energy planning and in water planning, but also understanding that there is competition for water in other areas. So agriculture requires vast amount of water, it's the largest user in the world. But also you see, like, for example, in Africa is the largest, is the most urbanizing continent. So cities are growing very fast, and that requires a vast amount of water as well. So we need to understand, when we look at the energy requirements in terms of water, we need to understand that there is also competition, and these trade-offs need to be properly assessed. So we saw that there is increasing demand for countries for this type of assessments. So we started this initiative a few years back, and actually we selected South Africa as our first case study. We are now in the process of finalizing that assessment. We are actually working with the University of Cape Town, the Energy Research Center.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So you have discussed briefly how both the water and the energy sector depend on each other. But this dependency, what challenges can we see from this in the future?
There are many challenges. If you look at the issue of the water use in energy, for example, that's one part of the equation. There's also the energy use in the water sector, no, that is also required. What you're seeing is also that energy planning, for example, is done at the national level, while water planning, we do it at the basin level. So it's a much more regional approach, much more regional focus. If you look at the case, for example, of South Africa, you look at the energy planning framework that is being used, and you say, well, we plan for certain technologies and the future expansion of the energy sector in a way that nationally you think, well, you might have enough water to comply with those plans. Now, when you look at the regional areas, a lot of the power plant expansion is taking place in very dry areas, and then you see that there are potential future physical constraints in the availability of the resource, water, to satisfy the energy needs. So if we don't plan accordingly, and if we don't coordinate with the water sector how the infrastructure required to supply water to the energy sector is planned in a coordinated way, we run the risk of having a large portion of stranded assets, assets that power plants that will not be able to run at the level that they're supposed to run, or that will be forced to shut down at certain periods of the year because of low water availability, for example. And also we need to understand that in those basins, we will have competition for the resource. So it's water that is being used for energy may not be used for agriculture. And that context needs to be understood very well. On the other side of the equation, energy requires a lot of, water requires a lot of energy for the abstraction, the transport of water, the treatment of water, and understanding also the cost implications of that additional energy in the water systems becomes critical.
And do you think that we're seeing enough innovative technology that's coming out?
You are seeing much more, of course, on the technology front, a lot of advances. There's also a lot of advances on management techniques, for example, in water and how you improve energy efficiency. And of course, on energy, on the whole technology arena, on renewables and bringing down the cost of renewables, etc. Now, what you see, for example, on the cooling processes on energy that requires water, there's basically two large type of processes. One is wet cooling that requires vast amount of water, and then there is dry cooling, which is basically cooling done by air. The issue is that then you have trade-offs, because cooling with air reduces efficiency of the power plant, increases the cost of performance, but also increases greenhouse gas emissions. So that's when you start seeing the trade-offs between water and energy. So you may try and approach your policy or promote dry cooling, which is one of the actually policies here in South Africa. But at the same time, your costs will increase of the investments and running the systems, and your greenhouse gases may increase. So these trade-offs, technology has a very important role, but so will, in the case of water for energy, infrastructure, so bringing the infrastructure to the energy side. And also there is an institutional context that is critical. The two sectors are managed separately. So we have policies in each sector that are not necessarily complementary. So we need to understand the policy, the regulatory framework, in order to be able to promote more integrated planning and investment.
And with Africa looking at a sustainable future and 100% access to both water and energy, what can be done to promote the whole nexus, the food, water, energy nexus? Both from a small scale up to utilities. How can we change this mindset around it and get sectors to work together opposed to working in silos?
I think you mentioned one of the critical issues that at least we keep on repeating when we talk about this nexus thinking. You know, that is not only a new concept, but that we actually implement it. And it actually covers all the different levels, you know, from the very macro planning scale all the way to the actual user. No? The challenge is one of access, as you say. You have 2.4 billion people with unreliable access to electricity in the world. More than 90% are here in sub-Saharan Africa. You have 660 million people without access to water. 40% are also here in sub-Saharan Africa. So at the end of the day, this is about providing access to the people that do not have it today. And I think it has different levels of interventions. And one critical aspect is that we need to try and elevate the dialogue to one that is not a sector-by-sector dialogue. This should not be the energy sector's main objective or the water sector's main objective. I think it goes beyond that. It should be something that you establish a dialogue with the ministries of finance, of economics, planning ministries at the national level. This is something that you need to raise awareness on the potential efficiency gains across sectors, how do you maximize environmental and social benefits, how do you minimize costs, how do you improve efficiencies across sectors, and across natural resources in order to achieve this goal. So it's an issue of keep on elevating that dialogue to the highest possible levels.
And then lastly, I'd like to ask you, what advice would you like to impart with project planners and decision makers in both sectors within Africa who are looking to adopt a water efficient project?
Yeah, critical aspects here is the whole issue of trying to advocate for better dialogue. We keep on promoting integrated solutions and integrated arrangements and integrated investments, but that is quite difficult to actually implement. You know, you have institutional fragmentations in the way that we plan and we invest in the sectors. So what you're seeing is also you have to come up with a mechanism where, in a sense, the bottom-up meets the top-down approach. So there's a national high-level scale messaging that comes from the politicians and the ministries, but also at the utility level, which at the end of the day are the ones responsible for planning, building that infrastructure, maintaining the infrastructure in both sectors. There has to be some sort of incentives for them to start talking to each other more. It's not an issue of maybe forcing something or imposing a regulation or a policy, but it's also the understanding that when you plan investments, the planning of the investments into the future, you're looking at investments that are very costly. You have a risk of locking in, unsustainable paths of investments and infrastructure that will be there for many, many decades in both sectors. So there's a critical gain in trying to combine a lot of those investments and a lot of those plans to ensure that you build with the synergies that you can have with critical joint investments, and also that you understand what are the potential trade-offs that you may face. That also includes understanding very well the social context and the potential competing users for the resources that are in the other sectors. So understanding a bit, going a bit beyond what is your normal functions or scope becomes critical. And we are seeing more and more that a lot of the discussions, even here this morning on utilities, we're discussing, for example, the issue on energy use for wastewater. Then all of a sudden we were starting to discuss how important it is to understand wastewater in the context of a basin level and water quality and the health impacts of poor water quality in a basin level, not only under the utilities purview. And that is critical, and I think we are advancing in that sense, but it takes time.
Well, Diego, well, thank you. Thank you very much for your time and joining us. And I hope we see more dialogue and more implementation.
Certainly hope so. Yes. Thanks for being here, and look forward to being here next year.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I am Ashley Turan, reporting from the African Utility Week studio.